A word of warning, this video is being done completely on the fly. I was planning to just go for a walk, but before I left the house, I read an article that's properly fucked with my mind. So this could go anywhere. Anyway, you'll be aware, if you've seen this channel before, that I'm British, or rather I'm English, British by birth, English by the grace of God. But I know I have a few viewers over in the USA, and I'll normally play on that. Now, the USA and UK, I think it's fair to say, we're very similar, but also very different. For example, many of the place names in the USA take their names from locations here in the UK. New York, New Jersey, New England, to name a few. There are various Birminghams and Manchesters, even California. That beautiful state, which I visited and love, gets its name from a poxy little fishing village on the North Norfolk coast. And the US Constitution is based largely upon the Magna Carta. Now, all that makes sense because so many of the early settlers to the New World, to the colonies, came from this green, unpleasant land. But then occasionally, something happens which would appear to be subtle, but shows that the Brits and the Americans are also very different. We recently had a mini heatwave here in the UK, and if you're British or if you've been to Britain, you'll know that heat is different in this country to many other parts of the world. I've got a Canadian friend of mine who said she'd take 40 degrees in Canada all day over 30 degrees in England. And that's because in the UK, the buildings are designed to trap heat inside them, whereas somewhere like Florida, they're made to dissipate the heat, to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And 40 degrees, which we recently had here in England, is 104 Fahrenheit. So I had American friends of mine asking, why don't you just turn up the AC? The reason we don't turn up the air conditioning is because we haven't fucking got it. Large businesses, yes. Large department stores, yes, they have air conditioning. Even our cars have AC. But our homes, the places where we live, no. When it's hot in Britain, you just get hot, some old people die, then we move on with our lives. And I've met so many Americans who've had their minds blown because we don't have air conditioning in the UK. When it's hot, you just grin and bear it. It's the UK, the chances are it'll be pissing down with rain the next day anyway. And that's in England. In Scotland, the only time it isn't raining is when it's fucking snowing. But I had to clarify what 40 Celsius was in Fahrenheit, because in the USA, you still use that method of measurement. I think it's only the USA, the Bahamas and Liberia who are still on Fahrenheit. Now, I'm old enough to remember when that was used in the UK, but then sometime in, I think, the early 80s, British people realised there's this system called Celsius, which is used on the continent, at which 0 is where water freezes and 100 is where it boils. That's fucking simple. But when it comes to other units of measurement, in the UK we've got a bit of a mongrel system, because we still measure speed and distance in miles. In fact, a few years ago, I went to see an American musician and he asked how far away is this town, and someone shouted out about 30 miles, and he said, thanks for telling me in miles, not kilometres. And it's like, okay mate, we use them here as well, because we fucking invented them. And we weigh ourselves in stone and pounds. But for almost everything else, we use the metric system. Now, because of my age, I'm at the crossover point, so I can use imperial. And do you call it imperial in the USA? Because if you do, it's called imperial because it was made by the British Empire. But I usually defer to metric, because that's all in tens. It's bloody easy. Whereas with imperial, I end up doing fucking long division. Whereas in the USA, I believe almost everything is done in feet and inches, pounds and ounces, all that jazz. Except for one very famous American agency who works in metric. NASA. An American friend of mine sent me a meme, probably a couple of years ago, saying that the rest of the world uses the metric system, but America has been to the moon. Yes, and America has been to the moon. I think it's a wonderful achievement. I love everything about the Apollo missions. But NASA uses metric, and that's not surprising, because the men who designed the rockets that went to the moon weren't American. They were German. They were captured Nazi scientists who went over to the USA after the end of the Second World War. Werner von Braun, he designed the V2 Vengeance weapon that blew the fuck out of parts of London. And now, we get to the article I read about half an hour ago, which blew my mind. It was published in the New York Times, and it goes like this. The headline reads, "A swift and easy way to heat water without using a stove." And the first sentence of the article is, "Consider the electric kettle." My American viewers, do you not know what a kettle is? Now, I can understand that some people on the other side of the pond are shocked that in the UK we don't have air conditioning. But I can't get my head around, as an Englishman, that people in the richest country in the world are still heating water like it's the 1920s. Then it struck me that in every American film or TV show I've ever seen, if they're boiling water with a kettle, it's one of those stovetop things that you put on top of the cooker. Now, I've never seen one of those, other than in said programmes and films, or in British movies from before the war. I'm middle-aged and every kettle I've ever used has been an electric one. You plug it in, flick the switch, and 2 minutes later, the water's boiled. And I fear I'm about to say the most stereotypically English thing it's possible to utter. Because that explains why the Americans can't make a decent cup of tea. Now, I've had tea in America. I was over in Florida, and a charming waitress came over, offered me coffee, but then hearing my accent said, "No, I bet you'd like a cup of tea." I thought that was wonderful. But the abomination she brought over, that I didn't spit it back in her face, was a miracle. It was almost like an open declaration of war. I'm an Englishman. There is no greater insult than to present an Englishman with a bad cup of tea, and thankfully I was only there with my wife, who's Irish. If I'd been with a large group of other Englishmen, I dare say by nightfall we'd all be wearing red coats, carrying muskets, and would be hell-bent on taking New York. Add to that the countless videos I've seen online of Americans making cups of tea using a microwave, and if you're British you'll know my pain. We just sit there and we shake our heads, thinking, what are they doing? Those godless heathens. So that was the thing that blew my mind. That the electric kettle, which has been available in the UK since 1893, the automatic kettle, the one where there's one button, you just push it on, then leave it, and it does the rest itself, that's been available since 1955. But it hasn't caught on stateside. However, upon a little investigation, there's a very good reason for this. In this country, if you're ever using corded American-made power tools, you'll also need a transformer to convert the current to 110 volt, which is what they use over in the USA. Whereas here, and in most of mainland Europe, we use 240 volt current. The American system just couldn't boil water quick enough because it doesn't have electricity designed to fucking kill you. That brings us to the end of this video, and it wasn't intended to be a sort of my country's better than yours, because of course we all know America is far superior to the UK, but more these weird subtle differences. That Americans are often surprised that in the UK we don't have air conditioning, and I'm surprised that in the USA they don't know how to heat up water. As ever, thanks for watching.